Hi, it's Dan here. We are here underneath the Largs Bay Jetty, one of the most precious places around me. And tonight's tutorials, we're going to be running two basic things. We're going to be looking at images underneath the jetty, which is a great place because we've got amazing leading lines going away from us. We've got water under the jetty. We've got the great legs coming down to play with. But the first tutorial tonight is going to be all about symmetry, creating nice wide images. We've got an 8mm fisheye lens, nice wide images. We're going to get the camera down super low, so I've got a little mini tripod we're going to use. We may even flip the camera upside down in the tripod to get it down low. But yeah, tonight's going to be about leading lines. We're going to have a nice full moon that's coming up shortly, so we'll be playing with that. The weather is lovely. The tide, I've checked, it goes down and it's going to be really, really low tonight, which is going to give us heaps of pools and ripples in the sand. Now, the other thing that we're going to be doing is later on we'll head down the beach a little bit and we're going to get the camera down low and play with reflections because I love reflections. I mean, we love reflections in light painting. It's a beautiful night. It's nice and calm. I'm on my own tonight, which is also pretty good. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a lovely, lovely night. And hopefully when we come out the end of it, the skills that you're going to have learned tonight are some more things about focusing in the dark, getting the camera down low, long exposures for the full moon, and how to behave around water, which is always a joy. I love water. Alrighty, I'll see you once the sun's gone down a bit. It's going to be a beautiful night. See you soon. Okay, yeah, so it's easy to take focusing in the dark for granted, but it's actually really quite a complex thing to do, and there are so many different ways to do it. And I have done a tutorial that is specifically focused on focusing in the dark, but I just want to take a look at this scene that we have here, and let's work on it. So the most common way that I use to focus in the dark is basically just a really bright torch. Now, you can see when I point this torch out there that it's pretty much lighting up the entire scene. And I make it a habit of setting my focus where I'm going to be doing my light painting. I know that I'm going to do my light painting down, let's say at this pier, let's say at this stick down here. So what we do is, now it's quite an interesting situation because I'm recording the screen here for you, I can't use the zoom in functionality on the camera. I'll probably show you at a later date how to do that. But one of the ways to focus is to shine where you're going to be doing your light painting with your torch, zoom in on the screen, and then do your focusing. Now I can see there that that's way out, it's coming into focus. And that is pretty much in focus right there. Wow, here's an interesting thing. We can see on the screen here the amount of salt coming through the air, which is amazing, which means that our lens is going to need to be kept really clean tonight. So that's one way to focus. And then once you're focused up, you make sure that your lens is flicked onto manual focus. So, because when it's pitch black, and if you go to press the button to record or to take an exposure, and your lens is set to manual exposure, what's going to happen, auto exposure, is it's going to go looking for focus and you're not going to get a shot. So that's one way to focus in the dark. Another way, if we've got a person in the shot, is to put the person out in the scene, hit them with the torch and focus on them. Now let's imagine that we're out on the salt or we're in the water and there's nowhere to focus. Here's a really good idea. So let's imagine that our scene out there is absolutely flat and there's nothing to focus on. What we do is we take our camera and we find something that is within an amount of steps away that we're going to be. So I would walk out into the scene, I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'd count out as far as it is that I'm going to be shooting, 10, let's say it's 10 steps. And then what I do is I find something that's about 10 steps away that I can put the torch on and focus, and I focus on that, and then we go out and do our light painting out there. Absolutely brilliant. So I'm all focused up and super happy. Okay, so that's focusing in the dark. Alright, so I want to do a test exposure. I'm curious to see how wide this 8mm lens is that we're using tonight, which is super wide. And so I'm going to do a 2-minute exposure because that's what we're going to be doing for our orb. So let's go. So headlamp off, ISO 200, bulb mode, 2 minutes, and off we go. I'll see you in 2 minutes. Alrighty, so we're coming up to the end of the exposure. There we go. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so I've done my test exposure. Let's take a look at it. At first it looks pretty crazy, but let's have a look. So let's hit play. Wow. Okay, there's a lot going on here. This is very, very, very wide and very, very, very bright. Okay. So there's a lot of elements to this image that I want to work through with you. The firstly is that it's very bright. I just want to take a look at the settings that we've got. f2.8 ISO 200. Wow. Okay, so this lens actually can go. This lens can actually go a lot wider. But let's take a look at the info. Okay, so it's actually blowing out. It's actually blowing out on the. It's blowing out on the sand there because there's actually big lights up on the jetty. But that's all right. Okay, I'm going to hit play again and get rid of the info. Let's look at the photo. All right, I want to zoom in and show you a few things. So it's obviously very bright up on the horizon because there's a big, bright full moon just coming up above us here. So that's lighting up the water. Now you can see here, see the shadow here of the leg? That's actually the shadow from the moon, which is just incredible. All right, so anyway, this is an extremely wide lens. It's an 8mm fisheye, and what that means is that what I want to try and do tonight is I have in my head, this is the first photograph I've ever taken with this lens, is we're going to get down towards the water. We're going to get the camera down nice and low. I want to spin an orb in amongst the seaweed, but I want to get the camera with some water between me and where I'm spinning the orb so we get a reflection. Yeah, but I think with the fisheye, I want to see if I can get really close to the camera just to get some crazy angle. So yeah, so let's go down and set that up and see how we go. I'll see you in a minute. Awesome. Can you see down there? At the moment, we don't have any good puddles of water to work on either side. So what I'm going to do is we're going to set up and just get a spin out. Later on, when the tide's out a bit, it'll be a whole lot better. But let's just get a spin done. Now, I think a lot of the seaweed is very wet, so we may get some really nice reflections off the seaweed. Alrighty, so we've got the camera down nice and low. Because we're going for, we want that symmetrical look, I'm really making sure I'm looking up and I'm lining up the line of the jetty with the camera. So I'm lining up the center of the jetty. Now I'm going to experiment with how close we can get with the spin with the orb to make it feel like it's not too crazy. So I am going to close down the aperture a little bit. I feel like that shot before at f2.8 was a bit too bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to f4 for 2 minutes. All right. So I'm all focused up. And I'll show you how, I'll take you over and I'll show you how we manage where we're going to do our spin, because we're spinning an orb. All right, so I'm over here where I'm going to be spinning the orb. And what I've done is I've lined up the center, so I'm looking up and I can see the center line of the jetty. And this is around about where I focused. So what I do is I clear a little patch. So I've got the center line of the jetty here. And all I'm going to do is literally scratch an X in the ground. So there's a little X down there. And then what happens is as I start moving around when I'm spinning the orb, you get this, foot marks on the ground. And I'll show you what I mean. So you can see, so there's the X there where I was, and I'm going to be walking around it like this. And what happens is that I can see where the cross is all the time on the ground, but if I lose it, eventually what happens is there's these little tracks in the ground from my feet. And it'll be really nice. So that's how I do it. And then it's easy for me to find every time I come back. And so that's going to be where we spin our first orb. I've marked the ground. Let's go back and set up the camera and get it going, see if we can't get an exposure. Okay, we're all set up. I've got my mark set on the ground over there. The tool that we're using is the Amber Fat White Softy head, which is just an absolute cracker for this type of thing. So I'm going to turn the light off, do an exposure. Let's see how we go. Let's get one under our belt. Now, because we're at f5, I think about, so I set the brightness on the tool. Let's wander out. Easy to find my X on the ground. Stand next to it and off we go. And done. All right. We've got an image. Let's take a peek. Wow, okay. There's a lot going on here, as always. Okay, so the orb is way, way overexposed. Let's just check focus. Yeah, I'm happy everything is nice and sharp. Okay, this is really good. Okay, this is really good. Let's take a look at this. So I'm gonna hit play and we'll take a look at this image. Now, it's not kind of, I wanted the orb to be more full, but let's zoom in and take a look. Okay, so it's really, really overexposed on the outside of the orb. So if we think about going back to basics, let's look at this image. I'm really happy with the ambient light because that's the effect that I want to get, is that killer, bright sort of daylight look, right? So I don't want to change. So as we know, the exposure time manages the amount of ambient light, and the aperture controls the brightness of the tool. Now, of course, with the ball of light tool, we can reduce the brightness down quite a lot, all right? But I'm still going to increase the aperture a bit because I think, so I'm going to go all the way to f5.6. And again, like we talk about all the time, the great thing about f5.6 is even the cheapest kit lens will go to f5.6. So I'm really happy with that. So we're going to go to f5.6. We're going to stay at 2 minutes. I was happy with the focus. Let's not muck around. Let's go out and do another spin. So I've reduced. So what we've done is we've increased the aperture a bit and we've reduced the brightness of the tool a bit. Let's go for it. I'll see you in about 2 minutes. Let's go. (1:35). I think it's always good to remember. It's always good to remember that, you know, for me, for the first sort of 5 years of my light painting, I used to spend a lot of time. I spent a lot of time under these jetties, just sitting around waiting, and it was so much fun. Okay, here we go. 57, 58, 59. 2 minutes. Alrighty. Wow, that's heaps better. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so let's take a look at what we've got. This is great. Much happier. So the orb is not blowing out as much as it was before. It's still a little touch, but that's okay. It's a bit of a sketchy spin. There's some pretty dodgy things there, but everything looks great. It looks, we can see a bit of moonlight. We're not getting a lot of light underneath the jetty. So look, I am going to do another one, but I'm going to do a couple of things. One, I want to get this camera right up near where we were. That's the idea of a fisheye lens, is that we can get it really big and bright. So I'm going to move the camera up there. I'm not going to change a lot with the settings. I don't want to change the aperture because I'm really happy at f5.6 that the brightness of the tool is right. But what I might do is I might just go longer because we want more ambient light. Alrighty, so let's do that. We're going to move our ass up there. Okay, so what I've done is I've moved right up in between this, these legs here, because in the image, bloody hell, you can see them coming up the side, which I quite like, just for a bit of fun, and it means we're going to be a lot closer to where we're spinning our orb. Now I'm just checking the lens. There's a lot of salt floating around. Okay, let's go again. We're not changing much at all. I've changed position. I'm happy with the aperture. I need to bloody do a better spin, that's for sure. There was a sketchy spin. Let's get into it. Let's go do another exposure. So I'm changing to 3 minutes because I want more ambient light. So I'll see you in about 3 minutes. Let's go. And I'm going to focus really well on doing a good spin here. Whoa, that is rad. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let's zoom in and take a look. I mean, it's pretty, it's a much better spin. It's cool because we can see through it. I love that. We're getting heaps of reflection off the thing, but we're getting plenty of reflection off the ground, which is nice. Now, unfortunately, the orb is not centered. We're going to move a bit closer. We're going to move a bit closer to where we were, and I'm going to try and move into the center a little bit better. So let's do that. I'm looking, I can see actually. So I can see. So I'm pretty happy that my camera is in the center, but I will come across just a touch. I'm pretty happy that my camera is in the center, but my spinning spot is not. It was just a bit off. So I'm just going to make sure that I've got my shell, I've moved it across a little bit there. But you know what we're going to do? Let's bloody move a little bit closer. Let's even just go closer, why not? And the great thing about having the jetty is it makes it quite easy to figure out if we are centered. Okay, I've locked the tripod down. Let's just check our focus. Yeah, pretty happy that we're in focus up there. Let's get into it. I'm going to turn this light off. I've moved the camera a whole lot closer, just to get a bit more extreme. 3 minutes is our exposure time. Wow, well, that was great. That was an absolute cracker. Using that fisheye lens, I mean, what a hoot. It's the first time I've shot with it. It's incredible. It's so tiny. It's an Olympus 8mm fisheye, a huge amount of fun. And if we look at the image, I mean, what a dag. I mean, yes, you know, I've got a 7 to 14mm lens. The 7mm is a huge amount of fun wide. But that was great, and cool thing to play around with. But it's a perfect opportunity for me to show you the difference between an extreme wide angle lens like an 8mm fisheye and something a little longer. And the cool thing about the jetty, and the water's out a little bit, is it's going to give me an opportunity to really show you what a bit of compression can do. So what we're going to do is I'm going to grab a 50mm lens, and we'll have a look at that and see how that, so 50, so it's a 25mm micro four third, which is the 50mm equivalent. So I'll just grab that. Okay, so we'll pop that on. Always been careful when you're out in the wild, especially it's blowing a bit and there's salt in the air, just to make sure your lenses are off and on for the shortest amount of time possible, just to stop any salt getting in there. I'm going to show you how I, nice and quickly, test whether a shot's going to work or not. Now, obviously, what we don't want to be doing is doing 3-minute exposures to see how the image is compressed. So what we can do is I just open, so we're on bulb all the way out to f1.2, and I can just hold my finger on the button, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and take a look. And at f1.2, you can get a good look at. it. Now, of course, if you don't have a lens that goes to f1.2, what's another great way to do it? I'll show you. So I'm going to bump. Imagine that the fastest that your lens goes is f5.6. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's basically going to be pitch black, right? So here's a great trick. Whatever the maximum ISO that your lens goes to, all right, bloody 25,600 here, you watch this, f5.6, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom! It's like daylight. It's ridiculous. It's a fantastic way to use your ISO to check composition and bits and pieces in focus. Alrighty, so anyway, let's get into it. I have got a 25mm or 50mm lens. I'm going to go back to a sensible ISO, and what this is going to do is I'll show you the difference that we get. This has compressed the image really well. I'm going to use my torch to focus, so I'm looking out there, I can see the peaking. So down where my shell is, we're going to All right, so down where my shell is where we're focused. We'll do the same thing. I'll do exactly the same exposure. I think we were, so let's go back and take a look at that last one where we were, where that last orb is, info. We were at f5.6 for 3 minutes. So I'm not going to change anything. f5.6, 3 minutes on my remote. Let's turn the light off and let's go out and I'll show you the difference that a long lens will make as opposed to the fisheye. Alrighty, let's go. I am just going to, once again, absolutely crank the ISO on this one so you can see what's going on down there. So you can kind of see where I am down there. So I've opened the shutter. We're doing a 3-minute exposure. Let's see how we go. I'm going to wander down. Where's my old tool? I haven't changed any settings on the tool and I'm just going to wander down now. Alrighty, 3 minutes. Wicked. Okay, this is really good. This is exactly what I wanted us to see. Okay, let's take a look at what we got here. Wow, so it's perfect. It's a really good example of the difference between the two lenses. Yeah, we've got a really nice shape on the ball of light tool. But the cool thing is you can see that compare this one with that. What a huge difference. You know, the fisheye brings us right in an ultra wide and then a longer lens gives us compression. So two completely different images, basically with the same setup, same settings, same tool, same location, but two completely different looks with a wide and a narrow lens. Huge amount of fun. Nice spin actually. In post-processing I'll probably pull a bit of detail out of those shadows. Yeah, which will be good fun. Alrighty. So there we go. So there's a bit of a tutorial under the jetty. So what have we covered? I'm really happy that we've covered off the differences between a wide lens and a narrow lens, symmetry, how nice it can look to have an orb that's right bang in the center rather than slightly offset. I put a good solid marker on the ground. We used a torch to focus, made sure we were locked onto manual focus afterwards. Yeah, that's it. Really nice orb under the jetty. Now what we're going to do is move across and we're going to do some work with a bit of water. We're going to find some water on the ground, get the camera down nice and low, and we're going to get some reflections. I'll see you in a minute. Woo! Okay, here we go. So we have our 4 images. Well, we've got the one dud that was overexposed. We're not going to look at that. Now, with all of these post-processing sections of the tutorials, I'm going to move very quickly. I don't want to be adding 30 minutes to the end of each tutorial. So we will cut to the chase. Here are the 4 images that we decided to keep from the shoot. Well, they're all the 4 that we got under the jetty, really. But here is my workflow. I tend to, if all of the settings are fundamentally the same, and these all look pretty similar, I will process one of the images and then apply those settings to all of them, apart from 1 or 2. I generally crop to a 16:9 for Facebook or Instagram, but one of them, this one here, this one here, or this one, we may do it for Instagram in a 4:5. So let's cut to the chase. These are all raw files. I always put the clipping up here in the top right hand corner. If I zoom into this image, we can turn the clipping on or off, and you can see the red dot here tells me that all that data is gone. I don't worry too much about that. I'm about to do something that may shock you, but this is what I do to every single image that I produce, is I hit the auto button. Adobe have been practicing this for a little while. I'll undo that and then I'll hit auto, and look what happens. It kind of takes us to a pretty safe place. I grab my cropping tool. The first thing I do is just check my horizon. Then I tend to straight away crop to 16:9 if it's a landscape image. Decide on where I'm going to sit it. Look, if we're being a stickler for the rules, we might pop the orb around about on the line of thirds there, but what I definitely want to do is center the orb. This is all about symmetry, so I make sure the orb is in the center of the image there. Then I start going through my sliders. Now, if I hover the mouse over the exposure slider and I use my up and down arrow, So I'm going in the up arrow and the down arrow. We can adjust there, and that just allows me to make nice subtle adjustments. So then these next set of sliders are all about how it makes you feel when you make the adjustments. Contrast a little more. It's already taking care of the highlights and shadows by using the auto setting, and I'm kind of happy where they are. I might bump the shadows up a touch, but we'll look at those in more detail in a second. I love the clarity slider. If I crank it across to the right, look at that. It makes it a bit grungy, which kind of works here under the jetty, but I'm not going to go all the way. Maybe 2 stops. Look, saturation, you love it or you hate it. I'm just going to give us 1 stop up. By going auto, you always get a bit of vibrance. I'm not going to give it too much. It's pretty bright under here. Now see the green? We can see this green on the leg here. There's some green lights up in the up off the jetty. Look what I'm doing over here on the right. I'm sliding the green saturation slider to the left a little because there's no other green in the image. Now let's go down and talk about noise and sharpening. When you hit auto, or for some reason on input, it gives me a bit of sharpening. Dial them right down. You may or may not choose to reduce the noise. I don't really care. I think it looks fantastic, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to talk you through some rules that I have around noise reduction. Let's look at the sky and this jetty here. Let's say for some reason you wanted to reduce the noise a bit. Let's slide the noise reduction up. But we need to add sharpening to compensate for it, right? By reducing noise, you tend to make images flat and a bit washy. I'm going to show you a trick. Over here, click the masking, hold down Option on your Mac or whatever it is on your PC. Click on the masking slider and look what happens. It's showing us in white where it's going to apply the sharpening. So we're not going to be adding sharpening to the sky. It's just going to be around the edges of the jetty and the orb. And then click off. And there we go. So we're not applying sharpening to the sky, which we don't want to be doing. That can make it look quite ugly. So I've given it a bit of noise reduction. I've given it sharpening to compensate. Funnily enough, the sliders pretty much always end up one above the other. I'll show you another thing. If we look down here on the ground, there's not too much, but sometimes in the shadows, this is where you will get color noise. We can see it here. We can see a bit of sort of yucky color in reds and stuff. If I slide the color slider to the right, the color noise reduction, it gets rid of that. That's the ugly noise for me. I always remove chromatic aberration. And look, there we go. I'm not going to do too much else to it. We've made a few adjustments there. They're pretty much things that you might do for personal preference, but watch this. I always do this. Here are the other 3 images. I'm just going to click on the one that we've adjusted, shift and click on them all. So we've highlighted them all, and then we go sync and sync all settings apart from crop. And well, I will for crop actually in this instance, and crop. Boom, there we go. Now if we do have minor tweaks to do around exposure, that's fine, and that tends to be where it is. So I'm just going to adjust the exposure on each one just to make me happy. There we go. That one's wonky. We'll come back to that. And here we go, this one is as well. So we need to adjust the horizon on them all. And I'm just going to check that the orb's in the center there. Cool. It's still a bit bright, I think. Personal preference. All right, what we're going to do with this one is we're going to do this one for Instagram. So we go 4:5. That's the crop I like for Instagram because that is the correct size for Instagram. Let's make sure we get something in the foreground here. Right, look how wonky it is. Oh my gosh, it's a shocker. So I'm just going to level it up, and we're going to just put the orb in the center. There we go. Here's another thing I do quite often. Down here at the bottom on the right, we can see post-crop vignetting. I'm just going to put a bit of a vignette on there. It doesn't need to be too much. Cool. There we go. So that is pretty much how I tweak my images for social. It's nothing fancy, really. The thing you need to realize is that, you know, for social media, this horizon's off. I'm sure it is. Let's check. Just a bit. All right. Then we've got to export them, right? So I highlight them all. I right-click and export. I always export my images for social media at 1920 long edge. I have a place that I send them. sRGB color space. sRGB is the color space for screens. We will talk in a later tutorial about Adobe RGB. I leave the quality at 100. I always resize to 1920 long edge because I think that's a good size for social media. And that's it. And export. I've already exported them previously, but I'm going to use unique names. Now, I do put a watermark on my images, and I do that in Photoshop. I'll very, very quickly go through how I do that, all right? So I'm going to open Photoshop. The reason I do it in Photoshop is I want total control over size. Oh, whoops, here's what I did before. Let's get rid of those. Let's get rid of those. All right, so what I've done is I've opened one of our images in Photoshop. I'm going to grab my PNG file. Now, I use a PNG because it's easiest to make a transparent background on that. Never leave your watermark here. That's a dick move. So I grab my watermark. I want to put it subtly in the corner down here. I don't want everyone in the world to know it, but I give it a bit of transparency. And this is why I always bring it into Photoshop. It gives me the maximum amount of latitude around transparency and positioning because it's always different on every different image. Let's take a look at how that looks. Cool. Merge the layers, file, save. Now it's going to ask us for quality. I never put it in maximum quality. It's only going to social media and we don't want big files. I leave it on 10. Okay. Let's go check it. Here it is here in my Instagram folder. And there's a nice tidy little watermark at the bottom. And it's only 675 kilobytes. That is a sensible file for social media, people. Doesn't need to be any bigger than that. Cool. There we go. So that's how I process and prepare my images. We're going to be doing a full nose tutorial on all things post-processing in Lightroom. Go and have a look at that when it comes out. But these are our 4 images from under the jetty. Brilliant. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this visit to the School of Light. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll be adding videos all the time. Head over to the Light Painting Tool Shop at the website. There's a huge array of tools I've made there for you to take on your light painting journey. Peace.